Boot Camp Fellow. She's a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and an ordained elder in the Lord's Church. Let's give it up one more time for Kayla Griffin Green and Alencia Johnson. Welcome to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the MLK Library. I love it here, y'all. This is so good. Welcome to Cleveland.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So glad to have you. I will share with the audience that it is a privilege to be able to be in conversation with you. I followed you. I started following your work. I became aware of you. I don't know what year it was, but it was at one of CBC. You were serving on a panel and talking about your experience on Senator Warren's campaign. And I was like, who is this woman and why have I never heard of her? So now I am a big fan, and I saw her last week be honored at Delta Sigma Theta's 57th annual convention. You were honored. I had to write it down. You were honored as the
Catalyst of
Change Award.
Yeah.
That's historic.
Yeah, that was, well, I'm honored to be here with my soror, and I'm glad to be here in Cleveland. That, I was really surprised by that award. I'm blessed. I've had a lot of accolades, but when I got the letter for that one, to be honored by my illustrious sorority in the name of Shirley Chisholm, who I write about in the book, that was a big moment and a reminder of the importance of being a vessel, right, and doing the work. So, yeah.
You've been doing the work. Okay, before we jump into the questions, one of the practices at Third Space is to do a soul check. So we want to check in with you. We had a meeting earlier, and I wasn't there, but I was like, what was the soul check question so you can be on page with us? The soul check question is, what makes your soul feel like summer?
Ooh, what makes my soul feel like summer? Being with my really good girlfriends somewhere, probably at brunch. Eating outside together, because like that table turns into so many, it's the after church devotional, and then it goes into all of the things, but that makes my soul feel nourished like summer.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right, let's jump in, because time is of the essence.
It is.
You titled your book, Flip the Tables. What is the story behind the name, and what are the tables that you believe need to be flipped in our community today?
So, you were ordained. My dad is a pastor. I love me some Jesus. My favorite story of Jesus is when he went in the temple and tore up the temple and flipped over those tables, because of all the hypocrisy that he saw going on. And that, to me, I've always been drawn to that story, because I get tired of this benevolent white man, blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus that everyone likes to talk about in mainstream culture. And I'm like, that's not really who he is. He had emotions, and he also was a brown man with hair like wool, and right, all of that. And so that story has kind of always been in my mind and in my spirit. And in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm coming off the Elizabeth Warren campaign. That's when the pandemic got real, like April, and we were like, oh, wait, we're not going to be at home for just a week. We're going to be home for a while. We're watching this election. What we thought in 2020 was the craziest election. Then 2024 happened, but I digress. And we also are watching, the protests of George Floyd's murder. There's just so much happening. And I constantly got the question of, how can I have impact in the world? How can I use my gift? People constantly ask me that. That's what my clients ask me to do, all of that. And I was sitting there. I actually left Boston and went to stay with my parents for a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic. And I remember laying there trying to figure out what I was going to do next, getting this question constantly, because people were wanting answers of what do I do in this moment, people and organizations. And I realized, our charge in the world is actually connected to us being our authentic self. And I'm a public speaker. I'm been on stages, on television, but I also realized that I wasn't being who I knew I could be. I was holding back my authentic self. And what I realized at that moment is, in order for us to change the communities around us, we first have to live and be bold and change ourselves. And so that's when the tables kept coming to me. I'm like, well, what are these tables? What are these proverbial tables? At first, I was thinking the injustices in the world, the racism, the sexism, all the phobias and the isms. But then I stepped back and I was like, well, what are the proverbial tables in our own lives that are holding us back? The lack of self-worth, the lack of faith, the we're self-sabotaging on our dreams. There's a chapter in the book called "The Red Flag Is You." Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. And so I realized in order for us to shake the tables in the world around us, we got to actually shake the tables in ourselves first. And James Baldwin talks about the hardest thing to do is actually face yourself, which is why the book starts in that journey of disruption of self and then disruption of vision, because you have to have a bold, kind of crazy vision about like what's possible in order to keep doing this work. And then disruption of community, and also reimagining what disruption of community is. A lot of people hear the title and they know my work, or particularly if they've seen me on CNN or MSNBC, they think this is like the playbook for what the Democratic Party should be doing. I'm like, that's actually not it. This is teaching us how to be in better real community with one another, because community is the thing that's actually going to save us in this kind of moment, right? Like if you can't speak to your neighbor,
right,
which that's a very real thing. I live in a new building in the DC area, and like there's this one neighbor of mine.
They've seen you on CNN.
I'd be like, sis, speak to me, because like when something's going down, you're gonna want to be able to like call me and see what's going on. And so I keep trying to talk to her every single day, and she's like, I'm gonna wear her down one day. But right, like how do we build that real community, right? Like we can have these panel conversations, but the community interventions are important. And then the last piece I'll say, how some of this really connects for me too. I've worked in a lot of advocacy spaces, on a lot of campaigns, and I would look around like, oh, we are not treating each other well. I worked at Planned Parenthood, worked with a lot of white women. We all believe in the same thing. They wear the Stand With Black Woman t-shirt that I created, but you over here making more money than I am, you get more resources, these microaggressions are keeping me out of the meeting. So if you're out here saying you were fighting for equity and justice and liberation, but yet you are sabotaging my ability to lead, I mean, that's part of, it's part of what happened in the 2024 campaign. I said on national television, it was white consultants that wouldn't get out of the way, right? And so if we can't treat each other well in the work, then what's the point of us actually doing the work and telling the world to treat all of us as a community fairly?
I find when we are in community largely with mixed company, doing the work is very ephemeral until you have to do it across the table with your sister. Speaking of, you hit on so many things, and I think that the reimagining is one thing that I really wanted to talk about, and I was going to talk about it later. Our co-founder Mordecai always talks about radical reimagination and being in community and space. When you wrote about power as not something to be seized but something to be reimagined, that is very difficult.
Yeah.
How should our communities think differently about power?
Yeah, it made me think of, so in the last chapter of the book, so you got to read the whole book. As a reader, I'm going to admit myself, there's a lot of books where I'm like only halfway through and I don't finish it. But there is, thank you. There in the last chapter of the book, I talk about the labor movement. And I talk about how like the labor movement is like one of the only movements that's really been able to be multiracial, right? And it is organizing around principles that so many people of different backgrounds can actually get behind. But it's also a reminder of, because again, let's go back to the pandemic. And we saw, I am forgetting his last name, Chris, what is his last name, from Amazon, who won that big case, the big lawsuit against Amazon, right? One of the Amazon factory workers. And it is a reminder that power is a numbers game. Sure, we concede our power so much to the billionaires and these systems, but the reality is the reason that they are doing the things that they are doing is because we are making progress and they want to continue to divide us. But if we came together collectively, we could shift everything. When I was in college, I learned about the protests in Tiananmen Square in China that actually inspired me to go study abroad in Shanghai. And it was literally these college students who said, we actually are probably going to lose our lives, but we are going to show up in thousands and make a statement. And it did. It set off a ripple effect. And so we have to stop conceding that power is a platform or money. Yes, that does help, but it is actually the collective. And if we start at the micro level, I'm igniting your power, you're igniting her power, then all of a sudden we are building from the ground up. And so I want us to reclaim power, and I want us to look at oppression. What we're seeing right now is a backlash to our brilliance, right? It's a backlash to the fact that we have been actually making a lot of progress, right? Like white supremacy is grasping on for dear life because we're trying to make some progress. And so when we flip it and see this resistance to just our very being as an indicator we're on the right path, we can reclaim our own power.
So this is all about tables, right? And when I read the title, and you talk so much about being a disruptor, the first thing I thought, and this is not one of the questions, but the first thing I thought was like, I know she got in trouble in school for being too talkative, because I got in trouble at school for being too talkative.
Yeah.
But you talk about standing on tables.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little, take us there, to show us like how you started as a disruptor and how that's come full circle for you?
Everybody loves that story. So I actually had to tell that story, but my mom's here because my mother actually likes to tell that story. I'd be like, girl, why are you embarrassing me? What's happening? So when I was 5 years old, in kindergarten, who knows what we were talking about at lunch, but my classmates weren't listening to me. And so little Alencia was like, oh, I'm gonna get up on this table. And I climbed on the table at lunch and screamed, like, y'all aren't listening to me. And shout out to she's deceased now, but my elementary school principal, Mrs. Walker, because she said to my mom, I know she's gonna get in trouble. I know, because my mom was hot. We from the South, she black. Come on now. Y'all knew what it was. I was scared to go home. She was like, I know she's gonna get in trouble, but Alencia is a leader. Yeah. And actually, in hindsight, looking at that, like that split decision took me on a whole different path, because we know the preschool to prison pipeline for black boys and girls is so quick. And so my mom asked me, she was like, well, what was going on? And I was just like, I had something to say. Duh. Like, I had something to say, and they needed to listen. And so it's interesting because I think there have been actually a lot of moments like that throughout my entire life. Like my freshman year of college, I got my cheerleading coach fired because I didn't like her. And I didn't like her. She wanted us to be sideline cheerleaders. And I was like, if I'm gonna be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, we are competitive cheerleaders. Like, this is a real sport. Do you know who we were in high school? Got her fired. I got like my Greek advisor, like she got in trouble because she was excluding, I went to a predominantly white school, she was excluding the D9 from the housing lottery because we didn't have the numbers. And I was like, well, you don't know the history of our organizations versus the other organizations. So I was just constantly doing this kind of stuff. And to be honest, I think my courage and boldness kind of preceded me, because a lot of times I'd come out of these meetings and these spaces and I'm like, well, wait, what just happened? Like, it was out-of-body experience. And it wasn't until I was working at Planned Parenthood and there was a black woman, Angela Farrell-Zabala, who's now over at Everytown for gun safety. We were colleagues. She said to me one time, because I had said something in a meeting and it shifted the whole meeting, not actually in the most positive way. And she was like, you don't understand the power of your voice. And I said, oh, excuse me. She said, your presence alone disrupts the atmosphere, but as soon as you speak, it disrupts the atmosphere. And that's when everything that I had been doing as a kid that I thought was like, they just not listening to me. Like, all these things were coming together. And I think, and I share that because I think so often we feel as though we have to stand on the table and scream and yell. And yes, I have a platform, but sometimes the disruption is simply our presence in the space. Sometimes the disruption is just asking the question that, y'all have been in those meetings where, everyone wants to ask the question, but nobody has the courage to do so, right? Sometimes it's literally just asking the question, then sitting there and letting people be in their discomfort, right? And so, Yeah, that little Alencia was a little troublemaker, and she, talked a little too much. But that's because I finished all my schoolwork early, and I was bored. They need to catch up.
I know that's right. You talk a lot. I've heard a lot of your interviews, and you talk about courage. You just said courage precedes you. Can you say more about that and what that looks like on your journey?
Yeah, and I use the word courage very intentionally in this book. I love Joshua 1:9 is one of my favorite scriptures, be strong and courageous. And I know the Bible talks a lot about fear not and do not be afraid. We are human. At the end of the day, there are going to be times when we are afraid, and we still have to keep going. And courage is, for me, it doesn't negate that there's fear there. Courage tells you that there's something greater than your fear, whether it's God, whether it's your community, whether it's the cause, whatever it may be. Courage will tell you you still have to do this even though you might be afraid. And I think sometimes, what's that book, The Body Keeps the Score? We don't really, as a culture, particularly here in the United States, I would say Eastern cultures understand this, and indigenous cultures, and probably our ancestors understand this. Our bodies and our souls know well before our mind do, right? And I believe that there have been so many times in my life that my soul has pushed forward, even when my mind was sitting here like, girl, what we doing? We don't, except I'm a Virgo in 4 houses. I overthink everything. And so if I always led with my mind, with logic, I would not be sitting here. And so I let my soul actually move forward. I let my body actually say, no, this feels uncomfortable, or no, this is where we're going to go. And I think that we have to be courageous enough to trust that intuition in us, right? To trust that I believe I'm here because of all of my ancestors, right? I am trusting that they are pushing me towards something. I'm trusting that God has put me in this position, and so if I am compelled to speak, I've just got to let it come out, right? And so that also takes, which I talk about in the book, having a good personal practice. Whether or not you're a person of faith, I think there's still something about tending to your soul so that you are constantly in tune with your soul, and so you can let your soul lead you, and that is courageous to do that.
I'm going to go off script again. You mentioned the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and we were just at convention this weekend, and Sunday, during our ecumenical service, Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie, my God, she preached a message that was so impactful, but she urged folks to read that book if they had not read the book. And one of the things that stands out to me is that what she said, and I wrote it in my other journal, but she said, we don't pray prayers of expectation because we get disappointed. And disappointment makes us stop praying. And so I want to ask you, what are you expecting in this time and season?
That's a good one. I got to go back and try to watch that, because I had to go to NAACP in Charlotte for the Wind Brunch, which was a whole word there too. What am I expecting in this season? I am expecting more. I say this so there's a whole chapter in the book called Goodbye to the Boss. My mom is here, BITCH. Getting off the booked and busy hamster wheel. And it's funny because I've been doing that work to get off of that. And then you kind of have to get back on it to sell a book. I mean, and I also thought the book tour was over like 2 weeks after the book came out. I'm going to be doing this for a whole year. Yeah. I am expecting more love in my life. I'm expecting more ease in my life. And I am expecting more answers to like my deep curiosity about life right now. So I'm expecting those things.
I love that. How is your faith playing into that?
Well, it's challenging me, right? Like it is what Bishop McKenzie talks about, right? It's what I put in the book of sometimes we are tested and we stop having faith. We stop praying when we don't get the thing that we have been believing, whether it's we've been putting it out there, life and death is in the power of the tongue, whether it's been in our prayers or your manifestations, whatever you want to call it, we give up so easy. And I have found that in this season where I'm at, I'm actually currently, now we're talking, you ordained, I actually started a fast today because I was like, oh, God wants me to go deeper. God wants me to be more responsible. And I was at oh my gosh, I forget where I was, and I was listening to a sermon, and they were talking about how we always go back to God or a spiritual practice when things aren't going well. But when we really need to dig in is when things are going really, really, really well. And I think recently I've been actually tested with that of like things seem to be go really, really well, but the enemy don't like when you're really happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or when things are going well. And that's actually when we have to really anchor ourselves more. And so I am learning that in this season. And that's how my faith is playing into it.
I love that. I'm looking out because I know we started a little late, and I want to get a cue for when Q&A should start. Okay, very good.
You got me being all vulnerable up here.
I know, I love this. I love this.
But the book, honestly, I will be honest, the book, I tell all my business in the book. I hide names, but like I actually share a lot of myself in the book, which was a courageous act for me.
Yeah.
And so I say in the book, I could talk about issues, complicated issues, like talk about being a devout Christian, daughter of a pastor from the South, advocating for abortion rights. Like that in itself, people will be like, how does this work? And I would say, how does it not work, right? I've been in so many spaces able to talk about other people's ideas, and you all will find this too, being vulnerable about yourself is very hard, but once you go through that, you have the courage to do any and everything. Mm-hmm. And telling our own stories, I talk about that in the book, that is actually one of the most transformative ways of organizing and activating people. But in order to tell your story, you have to have the courage to really be honest and tell your story.
Yeah. As in the organizing space, we always talk about like the need for one-on-ones so that we can know who we're in community with and who we are in doing the work with. And I've heard you talk about, the vulnerability and figuring out who you are apart from your titles. Can you talk a little bit about that journey and how you got there and what was the epiphany when you got there?
Well, I had a Black woman therapist who wanted to drag me for filth. And this was a few years ago. So the pandemic, like this book kind of narrates where I was in that moment in the pandemic of like, oh, I'm like searching for something, I'm figuring out something, let me go on this journey inward. And I was trying to find a new therapist, found this amazing Black woman, Dr. J. And so we're like in our groove, this is like months in now, we're in our groove, this is feeling good. And she said, so your homework this week is to answer the question of, who am I? And I was like, oh, great. I got the bio. And she was like, unattached to any of your professional accolades. And I was like, know what now? And she was like, just answer the question, who am I? And to be honest, she's looking at me, we're virtual. She's looking at me, I'm looking at her. And she's like, she was quiet. She gave space for that moment. And I started bawling and crying. I was like, I don't know who I am. Like, what is this? I can't believe I don't know who I am. And then I ended up tweeting about it. And I wanted to drag everybody else. So I was like, oh, if I'm being dragged, everybody else needs to be dragged. And what I realized is, again, I'm very analytical. And yet, to answer the question, who am I, you've got to live in the in-between, right? And that majority of the good stuff in life is in the in-between. It's not black or white, it's in the gray. It's in the multiple truths can be true at the same time. And it's also ever evolving. So who I am today might be different from who I am tomorrow or who I was yesterday. And so I actually am constantly now, every day, almost every day, I kind of subconsciously am asking myself, who am I becoming? And I feel as though my spirit is following that. And it has unpacked or unattached itself to again, I'm saying this as like I'm out here like promoting a book. But to be honest, this book was more of a personal journey for me than a professional achievement. This book, as you read it, I think you'll understand more. But this book was a birthing for me of something new, a breaking of me, of my faith saying, God saying to me, in order for you to get to these next levels in your life, you've got to actually give birth to this, whether one person buys it or 10,000 people buy it, right? So I challenge us to ask ourselves that question, who am I? And as we are asking ourselves that question, unattached to our titles, we are disrupting capitalism, because in the United States, you're only worth what you can labor. And so when you are actually answering questions and moving through the world unattached to that, that disrupts the whole system. Especially for people whose ancestors were enslaved, whose ancestors were literally only brought here to either labor or give birth to labor. And you're sitting here saying, I am actually more than all of that, right? And so it's a disruptive notion to ask yourself, as well as to ask other people.
That's very good. I want to give some context for Ohio and the world that we live here in the state of Ohio. For the last few years, I've been saying that Ohio is like a mix between Hunger Games and The Handmaid's Tale.
Wow. Well,
because
that's very clear.
I mean, yeah, our policies have moved in a way where anyone can carry a concealed weapon without a license. And we had a major historic win when it came to reproductive rights here in the state, that we had the largest coalition of faith, organizers, labor, voting, like everybody was at this coalition table to ensure that reproductive rights would be passed on the ballot through a ballot initiative, because our governor signed into law a 6-week abortion ban, right? Now, the latest thing is our state legislature is introducing a bill that says if you get an abortion, the prosecutor can charge you with murder. And they're passing this, they're trying to pass this, even though we have already passed this ballot initiative to put it on to make it in the Constitution. So they're trying to get it to the Supreme Court. And I'm tired. And so what do you say to communities that are organizing and trying to do this work, but we have another table that is put in front of us? And I ask this because of your background in policy and Planned Parenthood. What do you tell us who are organizing on the ground, who are hit with one thing after another?
Well, the Roberts Court sucks, so we don't even have protection there. It feels doom and gloom, right? I was talking to, I still do a lot of reproductive justice work, and in coalition with a lot of leaders there. And when Roe was overturned, I remember, I won't say her name because it was a private conversation, but a black woman in the movement, she said to me, she was like, listen, abortion was already pretty much banned for black women anyway, right? Like, we didn't have the same protections that white women do, regardless of our socioeconomic status. She also said, this is what gets me up every single day to keep going. Roe actually wasn't as strong as it should have been. And therefore, now we, being marginalized people who can have children, are actually at the forefront able to reimagine, rebuilding, or building abortion access in this country. So she's like, I have to get up every single day laying the groundwork for something even better. I don't want to rebuild what was old because it fell. I'm able to build something new. And that's the way that I talk about these tables and disruption. I don't want to rebuild what fell. Like, people kept saying, oh, we got to rebuild democracy. I'm like, that Constitution wasn't really working for me, right? Democracy as it stood wasn't really working for me. So what can I build that's new? The other piece of this, Stacey Abrams, when she lost that election, which was such a heartbreak, and then when Kamala Harris lost her election, that was an even bigger heartbreak for black women. But Stacey Abrams, I love her so much. She was like, you get defeated and you get knocked down and you take a break. It is okay to take a break, and then you get back into the work. And I pause on that taking a break piece because I think so many organizers, activists, elected officials, so many of us, as a matter of fact, I was sitting by one of our sorors, oh my God, on the plane. Let me tell y'all this story. I was sitting with her on the flight to Charlotte because I went to NNACP. She's sitting there with her law degree book. I'm 37, she's like 36. And she knew who I was, and she's from the Deep South. And she's sitting there with her law book. She's getting her law degree. She's running for office. She's between two states. She's on this board, this, all these things. You probably know what I'm talking about. And I said, sis, when are you taking some time for you? And she said, well, this one place I have to be at, it's on the beach. I said, when are you taking some time for you? She was like, December. I said, sis, I live in Virginia. I got a crazy gubernatorial race that I'm getting involved in. I'm going to take some time for myself. Yeah. And she said, well, there's no time, Alencia. I said, well, there will be no time if you're dead at 50.
And she's a plaintiff on a
yes,
lawsuit.
Yes.
On a voting rights lawsuit.
On a major lawsuit. But it is so ingrained in us that we feel as though we have to do it. If there's this there has to be an urgency of now, but there's this busyness. We actually kind of wrap ourselves up. We wrap our identity up into being busy. It's kind of self-righteous, and it's actually, God had to check me on that. He was like, oh, so let me give you a little ego check here that you think this work can't be done if you're the only one doing it. And I was like, oh shoot. And then I read a devotional, and it was like, if God rested on the seventh day, who are you to say you don't need rest? I was like, oh, okay. So I need to sit my little self down. So I share that in order to continue to do the work, the quote that got me out of bed after Vice President Harris's defeat, and also, point of personal privilege, I'll say this, y'all's former Congresswoman Marcia Fudge is the reason that I work for Vice President Harris.
We love it.
We love it. That's the reason I was a senior advisor there. Alice Walker has a quote where she said, you have to maintain a healthy soul in the face of constant oppression. Two things stood out for me with that, to me in that. Constant oppression, it's going to always be here. There is always something that we're going to fight. And so in order for us to continue to do that, we have to maintain a healthy soul. How do you maintain a healthy soul? Joy and rest. I had a friend tell me a few years ago, because my work is different kind of now, day to day. She was like, you're just in this hippie era. I was like, okay, because I'm going on hikes. I'm, doing yoga. I'm meditating every day, but I'm also helping get people elected. I gave birth to a whole book that is inspiring a whole movement of people.
And you're running a business.
And I'm running a business. But she was conflicted because I was saying no to different things, different campaigns, every single contract that came across. I was like, I don't need to do that. Somebody else can do that. Yeah. Right? Because also when we stay in these spaces and believe that we're the only ones, we're not giving an opportunity to someone else to lead. We're not the only ones that have to do it. And listen, our way isn't always right. Again, for me to admit that is really hard. There's so many ways for us to get to the other side. So I share all of that, and with all of these bills, all of these pieces of legislation, we are going to lose things. But we have to figure out how to take care of ourselves so that we keep going, because it is a lifetime's work. And I shared this with some collegians at Delta Days. I said, our founders, we always talk about how our founders were part of the Women's Suffrage March in 1913. They knew that when women would get the right to vote, it wouldn't include black women. Yeah. It came in 1920, but that was for white women. Yeah. They knew that it wouldn't be realized for black women until Jim Crow laws were gone. Yeah. And a lot of them were not living when that happened. Yeah. But yet they continued to press forward, because if they didn't do the work that they were called to do during their time on Earth, their descendants wouldn't be able to keep pushing the ball forward. That's right. And so when we also think about the lineage we're connected to, we're going to keep going.
That's right. That's right. Well, this is riveting, but I want to make sure that we have time and space for questions. And so I'm going to open the floor for any folks who have burning questions. If y'all don't have some, I have some more. So please raise your hand and someone will bring you a mic. And if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to ask some of the questions that I got. So I'm going to give you a second or two. Okay, all right, because I was about to jump. It's a mic right behind you.
I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. I'm a woman of faith too, and just trying to make sense of what's happening right now. So the question you asked about timing, is on my mind, and how do we discern the timing right now? Because what has been coming up for me is that there takes a level of disruption in order for you to build the new thing, like you were saying. And so sometimes when we try to fix it, you actually get in the way of what needs to happen next. But at the same time, you feel like, I can't just sit here and watch this happen. I have to do something. And so I would like to hear you speak a little bit more from a spiritual perspective, actually, of the timing. Like, how are you discerning what is happening right now?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I go back to, there are things that happen, like God understands this is happening and allowed it to happen, right? What is happening? And I think about how, let me step back. When I could not get out of bed after the election. I was at Howard on that Tuesday night, got home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and couldn't even actually make it back to Howard the next day to hear her concession speech. And somebody was like, well, we got to be there at the low moments too. And I was like, I have been with Vice President Harris in the trenches. Like, this is hitting me on a soul and spiritual level. I couldn't get out of bed for 2 days. And I'm actually glad I stayed still. And that is one piece that has been very clear to me in this moment, because we want to respond to everything. And it is so chaotic, and the reality is a lot of our responses right now aren't actually going to work. And so instead of wasting that energy doing that, it's time for us to really be still and to try to hear what we are supposed to be doing. And what I heard very clearly, my mother can attest to this, 2 days later I called her and I was like, oh, all right, I got to make sure my finances are really in order, because it's about to go down and I have got to be the intervention for my community. I've got to make sure that I am taking care of myself, because when it is time to ride out, like there's going to become the moment when it's time for us all to show up. I can't be a limping soldier on this battlefield, right? And so I feel as though this is a time that we are called to be really still, so that we can get the wisdom from our ancestors. So the other piece too, people are looking for solutions, and I'm like, no, my ancestors have actually gone through. This looks really bad, but I'm pretty sure our ancestors, the history books that have been banned that really talk about what's happened, they've been through a lot worse, right? And so, it's time for me to study and go into that hiding place. And I think that's what I have been discerning in this moment when it's chaotic, because that also is very disruptive too, of when it's very chaotic and you get very still and people can't figure out what's your next move or what are you doing. That is a spiritual fortitude that I also think too is required in this moment. That again, as I look back at our ancestors, they had a spiritual discipline and a spiritual fortitude in a way that was unmovable and unshakable. And also there's a reason that people are drawn to like Afrofuturism, because of the way that we as a people have been able to imagine beyond even this moment. It's why Octavia Butler, I can't read her books, okay? Because sis is like, I was like, I'm gonna close this one up, okay? And so that is spiritually kind of what has come to me in this, and that the answers are already there. We are called to a deeper spiritual discipline and deep radical community care, because we are a communal people, but that also requires us to get very still and deep within ourselves to actually be able to hear in the midst of this chaos, because this is all a distraction, right? Like this chaos is a distraction so that we don't hear what it is that we're supposed to be doing. So I hope that helps.
Very much confirmation. I'm on the same wavelength right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While the next person gathers their question, I had two things that spurred in me. One, before you answer the question, but I thought about in the Bible how Elijah was like, I'm the only prophet, and the Lord was like, I got 700 more.
That's right.
Take your rest. Go sit down and rest. And let the 700 do what they need to do. And then you can come back after you have rested, taking you a nap, got you something to eat, got yourself together, And Black is technology. Like, our Blackness is technology. And we can tap into that because our ancestors have done it, and we can do it too. I see you have a question.
Yes, I do. So I'm a young person. I'm a college student. And the more and more I find myself at certain tables and certain conversations, I find it difficult sometimes to toe the line between disrupting spaces and just generally navigating in them. I find that my youth or my interest in certain fields or just my passions and my consciousness sometimes puts me at odds with just people. So I would ask for any advice that you have in terms of navigating that, especially in the context of how dire the now is and how kind of dire the future is looking. Yeah.
What a wise question. It took me a long time to realize that, and I'm sure this is what you're going through. You're smarter than almost everybody at that table. And the hard part is navigating how to not be so, I don't want to say necessarily boastful, but like it rubs people the wrong way. And the reason I talk about light so much in the book is that, people are always talking about like, be the light in the room and all of that. And that light ignites other light. But the reality is you can also blind people and burn people who are not ready to receive you, right? That's still their issue, not yours. And so the thing that I would challenge you with, one, is understanding that it's going to be bumpy as you navigate through it, as you are getting through college in your 20s. I think I still sometimes show up at a meeting and someone will be like, Alencia, I'm like, you're right. You're right. I didn't need to tell them that I was right. I should have just asked the question. That's a strategy that I have learned, though, too. Instead of trying to say the thing that debunks them, ask a question and make them think. I have asked many questions that people sat there, and then the meeting's ended. I was like, I literally just asked the question, right? And also like repeating back to folks and then realizing too that not every battle is yours to fight, right? We just talked about this a little bit. Because your energy has to be spent in some spaces that you can actually move, that people are looking for your leadership. And there are going to be some spaces where sometimes you want to say the thing, but being so confident that your presence alone in that room is what's going to disrupt the atmosphere. And when people are resisting, I will tell you this. I know a lot of people say things about, it's so interesting, it's so like contradictory, because sometimes people will say, oh my God, we love young leaders, we love their brilliant minds, but then y'all challenge us, and then we're like, well, you don't have any experience, you know what you're talking about. Even if you're getting that pushback, I promise you somebody's listening. I was talking to some students at Howard. Let me tell you, they asked me some real tough questions, and they were looking to me for the answer, and I was sitting there like, I'm learning from you. You're making me think about this in a whole different way. And so you may not always get the confirmation that what you're saying is moving them or impacting them, but it actually is. And the other piece of this too, my grandmother, I talk about her a lot in the book, God rest her soul, Mrs. Ozella Bennett, she always said, you might slow me down, but you won't stop me. And I am of the belief that when people try to box you out of certain spaces, go build your own. So many of the movements that we talk about in history that people revere, I'm like, they were started by young people. I just told you, I went to study abroad in China because Tiananmen Square inspired me, right? The civil rights movement, the feminist movement, all these movements were started by young people. Now, granted, the young people who started them stayed the leaders for like 90 years. And then got mad when other young people were like, wait, we need to start a movement too. So do that. And I'll be honest with you, you got somebody like me who would be like, yes, because I'm tired. I don't need to be the only prophet. I'm tired. Please come up here and do something, right? It's like when David, I don't like the way that he did it, but the former vice chair of the DNC started a whole new organization to challenge Democrats in primaries. I didn't like the way that he did it. Don't run for a DNC office if you want to disrupt the DNC. But also, disrupt the DNC. Like,
he's getting a lot of flack, but he is like courageous.
It is courageous. And so, again, I have a whole thing around like a young, white guy in a space talking about some of our CBC leaders, all of that. But I do appreciate that someone says, look, we keep talking about building the next generation of leaders, but you keep telling me to wait my turn. No. We're going to figure this out now. And so there are ways to do that, and there are small ways to do that. And so if they continue to block you out and silence your voice, go build a table with people who want to build a table with you, and force them to pay attention.
I love that. Are there any other questions? We got space and time for another.
Oh, right over here.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for being here. So first of all, I'm a Biden-Harris alum as well, also a Howard alum like the boss lady. So really cool to see you here. And you said some things that resonated a lot about self-awareness. It sounds like the book was kind of part of that journey for a certain self-awareness. And also this thinking about when the right time to kind of get out the way. And so I'm really just curious about, for those of us who don't have the discipline to write a book, just what other ways have you what other things have you done in that journey for that self-awareness, but also what's the indicator? What are some of those indicators that it's time to step out of the way in this battle versus fighting this one now and taking the lead? Thank you.
That's a really good question. I think about my time at Planned Parenthood. I was there for 6 years, did a lot of great things, had a lot of great opportunities. Honestly, sometimes I look back, I'm like, y'all really let me do like all those things? Like, what in the world? But I do remember when I was transitioning into more senior leadership, more responsibilities, I had a team. My team was growing and my role was shifting. And there was actually someone on my team who I was bumping heads with, and I was like, what? I'm creating these spaces. Like, I'm like, what's happening here? And as tough as I look on the exterior, I'm real sensitive. And so I'm like, why she don't like me? What's happening here? And I realized that I was stifling the team from becoming what it could be, because I felt as though my strategy was the only strategy that was actually going to be effective. And how I realized that was, one, this resistance that was constantly there. I was exhausted. It seemed like everything that I was doing just was not working out. And I'll be honest, God sat me down and was like, you're the chaos here. It's time for you to shift. It's time for you to leave the space. And so I actually ended up leaving the team. The assistant director, I was like, oh, she could be an amazing director here. And she was. The team did better things without me. I was like, oh, that's great. My bad for being there so long. My bad. And then I went and built another department that started to do like some really dope and amazing things. And so I had to let go, and I had to learn that oftentimes we're going to be pushed to let go of something and try something new without actually knowing what that is on the other side. And sometimes we stay in spaces and we're constantly met with resistance, and we think it's other people, but it's actually us overstaying our welcome. And that was one of the things that I had to remember. Yeah, I hope that answers some of the question. Yeah.
Can I push you a little bit? Because I heard
Yeah.
you say, I'm going to keep you on track, but I heard you say in another setting that even as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
you have found yourself, it's like, do I want it done or do I want it done my way?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, again, y'all, this is I'm very, very open and transparent. There's a whole chapter in the book called Great versus Good Enough. And I had to get to a place of realizing, it talks through my college experience, but understanding we can't be great at everything. In my head, I'm great at everything. Actually, not even in my head as much anymore, but it used to be. I'm getting very real with myself. But like, you can't be great at everything. For example, Beyonce. And there's a chapter in here that I talk about Beyonce. Beyonce is the greatest entertainer of all time. Sis can't cook, and she's honest about it. She's like, I cannot cook. But like, does she need a cook to still be great? No. She's still,
seen her?
exactly, right? And so I had to let go of like being perfect at everything, of being great at everything. And then so when I became an entrepreneur and I had a team, if I was going to sit there and do every single piece of the project, I would be burned out. It wouldn't get done. They would be like, well, what'd you hire us for? What's happening here? And even if I'm thinking I'm doing it exceptionally well, I'm not, because I'm doing too much. And so I had to finally learn to like let go and just let other people do something. As you know, my grandmother used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. If she could do it this way and I could do it this way, you just got to let it go. And so I eventually got to the place of, does this just need to be done, or does it need to be done my way? And the reality is, I would say about 70% of the time when I was actually starting to do that assessment, I was like, oh, it just needs to get done. And then that also that gave me the freedom to be in my creativity. So we are so often letting go of these things, thinking of the negative, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing it anymore. They're going to miss me, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're like, wait, no, I'm creating space. I can be this creative over here. I can have vision. Because that vision is what's going to keep me going every single day when the world wants me to stop. And so, yeah, I had to learn that. And then I also learned it too. As an entrepreneur, you make very expensive mistakes. When I was looking at how much some of those mistakes cost, or not mistakes, learning lessons, I said, oh, I don't need to learn that lesson anymore. No. Let me learn that lesson one good time.
Very good.
We have one, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. Hey, girl.
Hi.
Also, I thought we was homies, and this read that you giving right now about the chaos and expensive lessons, we wasn't supposed to do this in front of all these people. Anyway, we have a question from our streaming audience that we will use as our last question, and then invite you all to get your book signed. Invite you all to get some of this wonderful fruit and veggies that my mama made sure y'all had, so y'all had a snack.
Mom.
And then make sure we all walk out of here before 8 o'clock. 7:59. Pinky swear. Y'all promise we gonna do this? Awesome. Okay. Here's our last question from our streaming audience. She says, I am struggling with meditating and hearing from God with the chaos that's going on within my own life and what's going on in the world. How do I find that inner space to get to that place of peace?
Oh, see, okay. So this is what happens. It's so interesting. My mom and I were talking about this today. So my dad's pastor, my mom a first lady of church. So she's literally my spiritual mother, and obviously, but for a lot of reasons. And this book is so vulnerable. It's requiring me to be so vulnerable, right? And that's a very delicate space to be in when you are public, right? And so really just praying for protection around that. So I've been in this space. I'm sharing this with our family who asked this question. I got back on this hamster wheel to put this book out and lost my entire daily practice. My practice that I'm talking about in this book. My like meditation, my morning walk, like all those things. Because when you're flying across country, 3-4 different cities in a week, like it is really hard to take that time. And so I have rededicated myself to that practice. A friend of mine, Debbie Brown, she put out a really good book, Living in Wisdom, I believe it's called, and it talks about getting back into that your own spiritual practice. When I started trying to meditate again, I was sitting here like, is the timer going off? Like, what is happening here? Meanwhile, I used to meditate for 30 minutes on the beach when like I'm on a vacation with my homegirls. They're like, she meditating, but bring the drinks over, right? I used to be able to do that, and now I'm starting again. And I'm forcing myself through the discomfort of it, because it's going to be uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to sit with ourselves. That's part of the reason I am actually on a fast right now, because I was like, okay, like things have shifted. And I share this to be transparent that I am in that space right now. There's chaos in the world. There's some chaos right now in my own life. And it is requiring me to be still. And the reason that being still is so hard is because the enemy doesn't want us to be still to actually get that wisdom, right? And so we do have to fight through that. We do have to push through that. We do have to also give ourselves the grace and acknowledge that, like, oh, right. If I haven't been meditating or praying or whatever it may be for a couple of months, yeah, sitting here doing this for 5 minutes is going to be hard. But it's going to get easier as I continue to do it day by day. I haven't really been in the gym in a month or so. Well, thank you. But let me tell you, lifting them weights, squatting 75 pounds, don't feel like I used to. But I have to keep going, right? And so it's also okay to, I don't want to say start over. We take little breaks in the journey, right? And if it's too much to actually get back into the discipline of, you know, however long your practice is daily, we all have to find 15 minutes for ourselves every single day. And I've said this, especially in a room full of black women. They say, well, no, especially our sorors, they're like, well, no, I don't have time for myself. And I'm like, listen to yourself say that. You don't have 15 minutes for yourself. And I don't think that's just a black woman issue. I think that is very much the culture of the United States, and that is done on purpose. And also fighting through that resistance of you sitting with yourself and being still is actually a form of resistance to this world. So if you can't do it for yourself, at least do it for the world that we are building, right? And eventually you will center yourself in that, and you won't feel so selfish about it, and you won't feel so guilty about it. But I charge everybody in this room and everybody watching 15 minutes to sit by yourself. And it's going to be uncomfortable. Don't listen to meditation music. Sit there for 15 minutes and keep trying and keep going, and it'll get easier and easier. And the next thing you know, you're sitting there for an hour.
That's our charge, folks. Sit with yourself for 15 minutes, disrupt yourself for a little bit, and see what comes out of it. I am so privileged to have moderated this conversation. Thank you so much, my soror.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of you all. I hope that you got your signed copy beforehand, but if not, you can make your way over to either purchase your book or get it signed over to my immediate right. Can we give Alencia Johnson a hand, please? What an honor.
Thank you, Third Space. Thank you, Third Space, for welcoming me. And MLK Library. I love libraries and black bookstores, so thank you.
We love the library. We love the bookstore. Get your book. And until the next time, make sure you're subscribed so you can see all the things, and tell them where they can follow you and follow your work.
Most of my social media is at Alencia Johnson, and you can sign up for my newsletter, alenciajohnson.com. It's called Notes for a Disruptor. And I do have one ask. If you enjoy the book, even if you didn't purchase it there, I hate to say this because I can't stand Jeff Bezos, but Amazon reviews really do help an author. And like me doing well helps other black authors as well. So even if you didn't buy the book there, go on Goodreads and Amazon to please review the book if you like it. If you don't like it,
leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
Leave it alone. Thank you all.
And can we give Kayla Griffin Green, our sister, a big round of applause for jumping in? Prayers to our other sister. Thank you all. You already got the instructions. Eat some food. And a final round of applause for both of these beautiful women.